Pour yourself a strange thought experiment. Line up 5 liquids on a table: a glass of vintage champagne, a small vial of perfume, a liter of premium gasoline, a unit of donated human blood, and a full cartridge of printer ink. Price each one out per liter, and the printer ink usually wins the contest for the most expensive liquid in the room. Estimates over the years have put ink cartridges somewhere between $1,000 and $10,000 per liter, depending on the printer model and the cartridge size, while a liter of good champagne might run $30 to $50. That gap, somewhere between 20 times and 200 times, is strange because ink itself is not an exotic substance. It is mostly water, a small amount of pigment or dye, a few solvents, and some preservatives. None of that justifies a luxury price tag on its own. So if the raw ingredients are cheap, the real story has to live somewhere else, and it does. It lives in a business model that is more than a century old. That model is often traced back to a razor company and to a man named King Camp Gillette. The popular version of the story says Gillette deliberately sold his razor handles at a steep discount, sometimes close to cost, so that customers would be locked into buying his disposable blades again and again, 1 cent or so at a time, for years. Historians have since complicated that story quite a bit. Gillette's earliest razors were not actually cheap, and the give away the handle strategy only really took hold decades later, once the original patents expired and competitors forced hardware prices down. But the myth stuck around because it captures something true about a whole category of products. Sell the base unit near cost, or even below cost, and make the real profit on the thing the customer has to keep buying afterward. Economists call this a two-part tariff, or more casually, the razor and blades model. Video game consoles are a version of it, often sold at a loss and subsidized by game sales. Coffee machines built around one proprietary pod shape are a version of it, and printers are one of the clearest, most aggressive versions of it that still exists. Look at how printers are actually priced. A basic inkjet printer can retail for $30 to $60, sometimes less during a sale. Manufacturers have said, in earnings calls and industry interviews, that hardware margins on consumer printers are thin, and in some cases a printer is sold close to, or even below, what it costs to manufacture. That is not generosity. It is a deliberate loss leader strategy, the same logic a grocery store uses when it prices milk low to get you through the door. The printer is the door. The ink is everything you buy once you are inside. A single set of replacement cartridges can cost $30, $50, sometimes $80, which means a household can buy back the entire price of the printer in ink within a year or two of normal use, and then keep paying that same amount, or more, every single year after that. Now compare that retail price to the actual cost of producing the ink. Industry, teardowns, and cost analyses have repeatedly estimated that the liquid itself, the raw chemistry inside a cartridge, might cost a manufacturer somewhere between a few cents and around $1 per milliliter to produce, once you account for the chemicals, the cartridge housing, and the packaging. Retail prices, on the other hand, can run several dollars per milliliter for the smallest cartridges sold. Do the division, and the markup is not double or triple. It can be 10 times, 20 times, or considerably more, depending on the model. Compare that to something like designer perfume, which is famous across retail for its high markup, and printer ink is frequently priced higher, gram for gram, than the perfume sitting on the very same drugstore shelf. That kind of margin does not survive naturally in a competitive market, because rival sellers would normally undercut each other until prices fell back down closer to cost. So manufacturers have built technical walls to prevent exactly that. Most cartridges now contain a small chip that communicates directly with the printer. That chip can block a cartridge from working at all if it detects a non-brand refill, or a cartridge that has been refilled and reset by a third party. Some printers are also programmed to declare a cartridge empty, while a meaningful amount of ink, sometimes 20% or more by volume, is still sitting inside it, because the sensor is calibrated conservatively to avoid a print job failing partway through a page. In some documented cases, printers have refused to function at all, blocking even plain black and white printing, if just one single color cartridge reports low or empty, even though that color was never being used for the job at hand. Economists have a name for this pattern: artificial scarcity, engineering a product so that its natural substitutes, in this case a refill kit or a compatible third-party cartridge, are made deliberately harder or flatly impossible to use. That protects the manufacturer's pricing power far more effectively than the ink itself ever could. Consumers have not simply accepted this arrangement. A large market of third-party and refill cartridges has grown up specifically to undercut brand-name ink, often at half the price or less, though quality and page yield can be inconsistent from batch to batch. Some manufacturers have faced lawsuits and regulatory complaints over chip-based lockouts, with critics arguing that blocking third-party cartridges crosses the line from ordinary brand protection into anti-competitive behavior. Partly in response, several printer companies have pivoted toward subscription-style plans, where a customer pays a fixed monthly fee based on how many pages they print, and replacement cartridges are mailed out automatically before the household ever runs dry. That shift is its own small lesson in economics. It converts a one-time hardware purchase into a recurring revenue stream, and investors tend to value recurring revenue far more highly than a single hardware sale, because it is predictable, and it repeats every month whether or not the customer is even thinking about their printer. Step back, and the printer ink story turns out to be a case study in a much larger pattern. Anywhere you see a cheap base product tied to an expensive, hard-to-substitute consumable, you are probably looking at the same underlying structure: razors and blades, consoles and games, coffee machines and proprietary pods, and now printers sliding toward ink subscriptions instead of one-time cartridge sales. The base product buys access. The consumable extracts the value. And the artificial scarcity, whether it takes the form of a chip, a proprietary pod shape, or a licensing restriction, exists for one purpose: to make sure that once a customer is inside the system, leaving it costs more than simply staying. Printer ink is not expensive because ink is a rare or difficult substance. It is expensive because someone worked out, a long time ago, that if you can control what a customer has to keep buying, you barely need to worry about what you sold them in the first place.